So now I'm going to try and get the composition that I had worked out with God and the Holy Spirit onto the canvas. And at this point, I always have to step into working with the Holy Spirit. In my mind, I do not have all the answers about how this picture is going to work, but I know there is a power in me partnering with the Holy Spirit and saying, okay, as I begin to draw, you, Holy Spirit, are going to step in and you're going to partner with me and enable me to do more than I could do on my own. Obviously, to paint a whole picture takes hours and hours, and you would get bored watching me just put bits of paint on. So what I'm planning to do is to tell you what I'm doing, do a little bit of it, and then pause the video while I carry on doing this repeated activity across the canvas. As you can see, I've cut out the sketch I'd done of me and Jesus, the central figures. And in my mind at the moment, I'm thinking that I'm going to make them out of a different media, probably fabric. That may change. God may say something different as we're doing it. And on my sketch, I had 5 couples dancing around. And so in order to try and get some standard size to those figures and stop me having to think too much, I've cut out 10 head shapes, which I've roughly placed on my canvas to match my composition. I'm yet to see if that is going to actually work and fit in with all the bits I want to put in. But what I'm going to do to start with is to draw in some of the body lines with charcoal to see how the work will go together. As I've been preparing this picture, God has been talking to me about the details that matter. Don't get distracted by everything. Don't try and fill in all of the bodies. The important bits are the faces looking at each other, the hands touching. Get those bits in and we'll see what happens to the rest. So here we go. Let's try. I'm going to try and put these figures in up here. And the good thing about the charcoal is that if you make a slight mistake, you can rub it off and move it really easily. So I'm quite happy with how the heads look. Not so sure about the hands, but I know the hands are important and God wants the hands in the picture because it's us holding on to him that is significant in this. So I think that's okay. What I'll do now is pause the video and see if I can draw the other figures in, and then I'll come back to you. As I've drawn these figures in over here, it's just hit me again that the figure that is me is kneeling before God. And God's, in my sketch, I've just noticed that God is, the knees are important, and she's kneeling. And this representing God or Jesus is bending down, so he's meeting me where I am, which I just thought was amazing. Now, as you can probably see from all the rubbings out here, I've struggled getting this couple in, getting their arms in the right place and their hands looking half decent. So just when you're painting a picture, you always get to a point where you think, this is not working. But it's as in life, just because something doesn't work the first time, don't give up, keep going, believe that it's going to turn out okay. So hopefully that's sorted for now, and I'm going to move on to the other figures. I've just drawn in the lifted up figure. Now, God and I have had many conversations about that lifting up, about who he chooses to lift up and when he chooses to lift up. And the interesting conversation I've had about is how if God is going to lift you up, you have got to be completely committed to the fact that he's going to lift you up. You have to cooperate. You have to give permission. God just can't lift up people to be seen if they aren't cooperating in that process. And also, having watched Strictly Come Dancing, I've learned that you need a strong core to be lifted up. It's not just God lifting up. The person being lifted needs to have strength in their own body to hold that shape while they're lifted. So I've had many conversations with God about strengthening my spiritual core, about whether I would give permission for God to lift me up or not, and about how it's in his timing and nothing actually that I can control. It would be what he decides to do if he decided to do it. Now, interestingly, just having said about whether I'd like to be lifted up and the conversations I have with God about that, the pose just before that in this dance that I'm painting is a very close pose of God holding me in his arms, right up close to him. And I think that's significant. If we're going to be lifted up by God, it's preceded by us being very close and held in his arms and knowing exactly who we are and how we're loved. Now, I think I've got my figures on where I want them. And then always there is a time to stand back and have a look and see if that works as I thought it might. And it's quite handy seeing it on the video screen because I can stand back without standing back. And that looks okay. So now I'm going to get some paint ready and to start put some different colours onto this picture. This is the bit that I am relying on the Holy Spirit for because I haven't made good decisions, firm decisions in my head. So it'll be exciting to see how it turns out. Even the painting of this picture is a dance with God. Every time I pause the video to get another bit ready or to get a cup of tea, I'm having to find my peace again with God so that we can carry on. So even this dance, even at this moment, this is a dance with God to create something. The hard thing for me now is because I love to put all the details in and have my pictures looking lifelike and realistic. And I really know that God says that's not important in this picture. So I'm going to have to put aside what I want and do what he has said, which is to pick out the important details. So the first thing I'm going to do is to try and pick out the faces and make it so that it's obvious they're looking at each other. So instead of doing realistic lighting, I want to make the two sides of the faces looking at each other to be pale and give them a 3D-ness by making the back of them more rounded. So I have to stop talking while I do that because I need to look at the canvas. A little step back and have a look. Not quite round, but not too bad. As I'm painting this, I'm just reminded of that verse where God says we reflect his glory. So as this person is looking at that person, you can see the reflection, the glory reflected off them. Right, and so now I'm going to pause the video and put that paint on all the figures. So I'm just reminded, having done those faces as I was painting, of the bit in the Bible that says about, Lord, let the light of your face shine upon us. And as I've painted each face, that's just come back to me again. Let the light of your face shine upon us. And there's such a joy in painting with the Holy Spirit. You know, God gives us gifts, gifts that are part of us that we can choose how we use them. And every time I paint with God, there is such a joy. There's always fear to overcome. There's always the enemy trying to say, oh, you don't want to do that, that will make you look silly. But there's always the joy once I step past that fear and step into it. Now, the next thing I feel like God is saying is really important, the detail to paint, is the hands, because he's offering to take our hand and guide us through life. He doesn't leave us. He doesn't say, go over there. He doesn't just give us directions. He doesn't give us a sat nav. He offers to take our hand and guide us through life. So the next thing I'm going to paint is the hands. Now, it's going to be tricky. Hands are a bit, I don't know. You know exactly what hands look like. So it's hard as an artist to get those hands to look realistic enough for you to believe they are hands. So as just a bit of a painting tip here, your hand goes 2/3 of the way up the size of your whole head. So I've cut myself a little piece of paper that is 2/3 the size of the heads. So I'm going to use it now to help me get this hand the right size on the back there, as God is holding me close. I want his hand to be the right size. I think that's about the right size, so I'm just going to make it look a little bit more realistic now. I was hoping to avoid painting the hands of that figure up in the air, but as I've moved around the picture, I've really got the sense from God that she needs to have empty hands. If He's going to lift us up, it's for His glory. It's not for our benefit, particularly, it's not for our agenda. It will be to show Him and His glory. So we need to be empty handed, not taking anything with us, just going with Him. So now I've done all the hands and I'm going to try and pick out some of the lines of the bodies to try and join these disembodied hands and heads together to make it look a bit more sensible. So I'm going to just dress my figures in white, I think, just to keep it simple, and add some lines on. Not quite sure how this is going to go. A little bit, yeah, a little bit hoping God steps in here. I've tried not to make that too definite, so I'm going to add the rest in and see if I want to add more definition or just leave it like that. Right, well, I've got to the point in this picture now where I need to step back from it to ignore it for a while and then look at it with fresh eyes to see what God's saying to me